Today, we're talking about boundaries as bridges, a really important topic for our personal lives and then how we interact with people around us, as well as how we consume news and information about the world around us. So let's dive in. But first, my name is Salimah, yoga therapist. And here we talk about all things that are spiritual, personal development with a yogic understanding of how you can relate to the world from a spiritual perspective. And so let's dive in, shall we? I've been exploring this topic of boundaries for a really long time. And in particular, the topic comes up a lot in my mentoring programs. One is Kundalini yoga training, and the other one is harmony within. Because what we know to be true is that in order to operate harmoniously in community, we need ways to mitigate conflict, and we also need to have a strong sense of our own values, our beliefs, and our purpose. And when we have that, a boundary is an extension of those experiences. Okay, so that's number one. Number two is that boundaries are how we treat ourselves. So contrary to popular opinion, a boundary is not about what this person can say to me and what this person cannot do to me, but rather what am I willing to receive? How am I willing to engage in the world? And I'll give you a couple of examples. A personal boundary can be, I will not be in places where there is hate or intolerance. So if I hear racism, sexism, homophobia, anti-immigrant sentiments, I won't be in those experiences. So I will excuse myself. Hey, I think this conversation is going to injure or harm people. Let's stop it here, or let's change direction. The other way I could approach it is, I see where this conversation is going, and I'm going to excuse myself. This doesn't fit my values. I know it's a lot easier to say than it is to actually do, but I want you to have some words ready. So when you create a boundary for yourself, a very important part is to know that when we create that boundary, here's the things that I'm no longer willing to tolerate because they harm my self-esteem, they harm my self-worth, they are against who I am and what I value. People will have a response to that, a reaction to that. So not only is it important to be prepared for your own self, it is also important to be aware that people will have responses to that. Okay, so these are two really important components of understanding boundaries. Number three is that you can think about boundaries as your personal policy. My personal policy is I won't shop in places that have poor hiring practices, or I won't spend my money in places that exploit children or women as workers. So those are my personal policies. You can see that policy and boundary can be part of that same conversation. There are lots of different styles of boundaries and types of boundaries. So let's talk about that. A boundary can be very rigid. No means no. A boundary can be flexible. In these kind of situations, this is what I'm going to do. And a boundary can be porous, soft, malleable, depending on the moment, depending on the day. And so in your own mind, think about where it is that you have very rigid boundaries, and where is it where things soften, and where do you keep them soft so that people don't even see them? Where are those places in your life? And ask yourself, is it appropriate? Am I really firm and creating harsh lines where I could be softer, where there is trust and there is experience that's been built, and I know I don't feel harmed in those places? And are there other places where you leave the conversation feeling a little trampled or a little unheard? And so this is an invitation to start thinking about, how do boundaries show up? How do you enforce them? And where are they strongest? Where are they softest? And where do you find a nice balance? Now, having said that, maybe you're sitting back thinking, I don't know if I've ever set a boundary. Maybe I've been a people pleaser all my life, and this is just new foreign concept. And I think that's real. And part of that reality is that when we, as children, as we grow up, we often found that in relationship to the caregivers and adults in our lives, we didn't necessarily have the power or the control to exert ourselves. And so this habit stuck. And you can think about people pleasing as a habit, a response to very ingrained patterns of being. And as you think about this topic, start to consider where can you offer a boundary where it doesn't have huge implications. So maybe you don't start with boundaries at home. Maybe you start with boundaries with strangers. Maybe if somebody steps in front of you in line, you start to say to them, hey, I was here first. Very simple, with a stranger. No need to take that home. No need to live with the long-term consequences of that, but rather to start using your voice and to start. The reason all of this is important is that boundaries separate us from everybody else. And if you grew up as an empath, you grow up as somebody who is sensitive and tuned in to how other people think of you or what other people expect of you, it is very second nature to just keep doing that. And the long-term challenge of that is we oftentimes will lose track of what it is that we value, what is important. Think about all the times where, you're used to somebody else deciding what to have for dinner, and then all of a sudden they ask you, what do you want to eat? And you don't have an answer. That's a really simple example of, who am I in all of this? What do I prefer? And I know the kids would really like McDonald's, but I don't want to eat that. I want to eat something, I want to go for sushi, or I want to go for whatever. And so really understanding what your own needs and preferences are means understanding that there's a separation between you, your thoughts, your feelings, and the people around you. And understanding that you voicing those needs is also important, because having those points of view and having something to contribute adds to the dynamic. And part of adding to the dynamic, part of living collectively, is understanding where you stop and where others start. In that way, not only do we observe our own boundaries, but maybe in this conversation, you've realized, oh, maybe other people were trying to set a boundary with me, but I just didn't get it. I didn't read the cues. I didn't get the language. I didn't want to see that. And that's part of the process. So as you now start to think about, where are the boundaries in my life? How do I convey them? What words do I choose? Know that it's a process. So there is a uncomfortability that starts, oh my goodness, I think I need a boundary here, which could make us feel guilty, could make us feel embarrassed, make us feel like, what if they don't like me anymore? My body is responding. I feel nervous to say what I really feel. But that's the beginning phase. The second one is that messy middle, where you might get really tough, really rigid with your boundaries, and then learn how to soften them or say it differently. And then there is that later place where you start exercising them more often. You understand how to talk to that person and to let them know that something has been trespassed, and you're no longer scared of the consequences, because how somebody reacts to your boundaries is also a signal of the relatability in that relationship. Okay? I'll say it again. How somebody responds to your boundaries is a function of that relationship. And so as you assert yourself more, as you voice your concerns, your thoughts, your feelings, other people may say, hey, who's this? Like, you used to be so easygoing and now you're like not. And so you may get some pushback, and just know that that's normal. And part of normalizing your own separateness from everybody else is then being able to fill your own cup. Okay? So if nobody else wants to go for sushi, you can go and grab yourself your own dinner. You can make sure the kids get McDonald's, that's what they want. But then you also create some time and space for you to get what you want. And when the kids know you have a different kind of preference, they'll make space for that too. So kids is one place, partners is another, extended family is another, community is another, the outside world is yet another. I've seen so many things now in the news where, people are starting to say, okay, well, if certain companies don't have policies that respect all or are removing diversity, equity, and inclusion clauses, maybe I don't want to shop there anymore. Maybe I don't want to support those businesses that don't support who I am. And that's a boundary. And I think a really important boundary, because, billionaires become billionaires because we shop with them, we spend with them. And wouldn't it be such a powerful statement to then go out and spend in local businesses, to maybe spend a couple of extra dollars but support a local business that has a family and that you know the owners, and that people will actually start to thrive from the dollars that you spend. So that's where boundaries come in a much bigger perspective. Boundaries require clear communication and clear actions. So it's one thing to say, oh, this is my boundary. The second one is what's the words that you're going to choose, and what are the clear consequences? Okay, I'll give you a simple example. We've been having discussions about everybody doing their dishes here in the house, and I have been mostly in charge of doing the dishes by default, also by choice, and also because I thought that that's what I needed to do. And as I realized that this is a drain on my time, and every time I turn around there's dishes, I don't get to do all the things I want to do. And so we've been having really in-depth conversations about responsibility and taking action. And part of that is me going into the kitchen and saying, I have to leave. I have to deal with the discomfort of leaving it there because they're not mine. We've had the conversation and it's not my responsibility. It's a collective responsibility. And so I have to empower the collective by not doing it, because if I do it, nobody else has to. And I think that as a parent, as a partner, as somebody who lives with many other people, that it's really important to hold that. And that means I take responsibility for what I can do, and to give everybody else opportunity to take responsibility for all the things that they need to do. And that's been a hard lesson, because I work at home. So if there's dishes in the sink, I'm the first one who's going to experience them. And let me tell you that you can still make dinner. I've learned you can still make dinner even though there's dishes in the sink. This was news to me and very shocking, and I lived through it and I can tell the tale. So I want you to know that it's hard work, and it's hard work to set, because oftentimes we feel guilty. I didn't do it, or I wanted to do something else, or I didn't answer that phone call, or someone was expecting something of me. And so we feel guilty. And I want to say here that there is no growth without guilt. I'll say it again. There's no growth without guilt, which means that we have to allow ourselves, normalize feeling uncomfortable, feeling the discomfort of unmet expectations, of saying no where we previously said yes, where we did it even though there was resentment. Because if you do it, we start to resent people around us, not because of them, but because how we might be trespassing against ourselves. And that is a harsh lesson. It is a tough. So if you're listening to this conversation, thinking about how other people make you angry or feel resentful for having to do the thing that other people are not doing, then I invite you into that place inside of yourself to ask, who are you angry with? Where is that resentment building up? And I can almost guarantee that part of that is how we let ourselves down, how we sabotage our own needs and desires in order to make way for everybody else. And then feel equally trespassed when they don't take the same initiative towards us, right? And so this is human nature. And part of human nature is going through the growing pains. And so guilt is something that comes up when we know that we have done a bad thing. Guilt is I've done something wrong, and shame is I am wrong. And we have, many of us, been trained from very early age to get along, to do the thing, to make it easy for others. And so when we stop, when we start to operate differently, we're going to feel guilty, because it goes against all that training that we have received over decades and decades and decades that says, good girls do this, not good girls do that. And it's time to reclaim that, because what we know to be true is that good girls don't change the world. It's the ones who are willing to break the rules, the ones who are willing to go against ingrained habits and conforming and complying and doing all those things. And part of that is competitiveness. Look at me, look how good I am, look how bad you guys are. And getting real with that, getting honest with that. The last place, well, two pieces. Boundaries is a process. And from a yogic perspective, your boundaries are energetic. So think about the space around you, 9 feet in all directions. Okay? Imagine a white light filling up that space, up, down, around, across, and that energetic field is also a boundary. People sense your boundary. If you're in a good mood and feeling compassionate and positive and all the things, then people respond to that energy. And you know that to be true. And in other times where you're feeling negative or resentful or angry or upset, people also tap into that energetic boundary. And so one thing that you can do before you go into conversation or before you enter into before I enter into the kitchen is surround myself with white light. What are the thoughts and feelings that I'm having as I move into another space? And how can I operate there with clear boundaries? Okay, so imagining that space around you is a really good starting spot. That's a yogic perspective. This space is called your aura. And when you think about your aura, when you infuse your aura with what you most intend, you want everyone to chip in, you want everyone to collaborate in this particular adventure, we want ease and flow in the conversation, then that's what we need to walk with in order to get that in return. It is a little extra step to think about, and at the same time, very rewarding. All right, so that's your energetic boundary. The way to enhance your energetic boundary, number one is your thoughts, number two is your feelings, number three is your vibratory frequency. What does that mean? Your vibratory frequency is literally the vibration of the thoughts and words and beliefs that you hold. And the way to shift that is to work with positive affirmations, work with affirmations. In the world of Kundalini Yoga, there are so many. I am bountiful, I am beautiful, I am bliss. Happy am I, healthy am I, holy am I. And then in a more mantra-inspired way, you could think about your favorite mantra, your favorite spiritual wisdom, and use that as a way to infuse this aura. In the world of Kundalini Yoga, you can use the mantra Satnam. Truth is my name, and invoke the truth as you walk into that conversation. Walk into the truth as you do your household chores, so that you do it from a place of willingness. And if it isn't willing, that you're also able to communicate that. Okay, so those are some really important ideas that you can think about. The next step is to consider, what do good boundaries feel like? What does it feel like to have a good boundary? And here's something that you can also consider is doing a drawing. So let's say you take out a piece of paper and you draw yourself in the middle, however way you draw that. What is the boundary? How much space do you need around you with people who you live with? How much space do you need to exist in collaboration with the people that you work with, or your community members, or your parents, or your children, or. And think about what that could look like. What are the colors? What are the shapes? What are the proximities? Are people really close? Are they a little further out? Do you need a little more space? And when you start to draw that out, you get a visual understanding of what it is that you need. And so these are lots of different ways to explore this topic of boundaries. If you would like to dive in more, I have a video on my channel here called Creating Boundaries. It is a beautiful practice. Use your body to create circles of protection, circles of energy. And in that energetic expression, you become more clear and clear. That's it for me today. Thanks everybody for listening. I'd love it if you drop some comments below. Let me know what resonated with you in this conversation. What do you want to hear more about? And did this help you understand a situation that you're in a little bit better? Until next time, lots of love to you. My name is Salimah, yoga therapist. And if you want to join Harmony Within or Kundalini Yoga training, check out the description box. Lots of love.